There's two filmmakers and they have the exact same camera. One consistently books jobs at $5,000 plus, and the other struggles to book $500 days. That's a generalized scenario that I've seen happen over my decade in the industry several times. Today we're going to talk about some reasons that might be and how to eventually work yourself into some higher paying gigs. Before we dive in, if you're new here, my name is Keaton. I am a filmmaker and DP based in Oklahoma. I also developed this app called CineTemp. CineTemp is an application developed for filmmakers to help them quickly calculate the white balance of a room. And coming as a free update in version 2.0, you'll also be able to calculate the ND that you need for a specific scene. You can take photos, save them to your library, and reference them later. Now let's dive into it. The first reason some filmmakers get paid more is because they have skill sets beyond their camera and equipment. Clients tend to hire confidence and solutions. For the sake of this argument, let's call that our soft skills: leadership, communication, problem solving, etc. And we'll zone in on the DP side of the filmmaking aspect because that's where most of my experience is. If I'm a client, whether I'm a production agency or a company working direct with a filmmaker, I need somebody that has really clear communication. And I think that that's important as a filmmaker stepping into this industry. You need to step back and empathize with how you would like to be communicated with. Being clear, confident, and calm is important whether you're working with a business, a production company, or a producer, and that's going to lead to more and more calls and higher paying gigs. Next, let's talk about leadership, because that's also a very important part of filmmaking. So I think being a leader in this industry is a constant balance of knowing when to take charge and when to take a step back. For example, if you're a director of photography, sometimes your gaffer may have an idea of how to light something. You may have your other idea, but I would say for the majority of time, go ahead and let them run with it, because they're professional and they are working in the industry as a gaffer, and if you hired them, trust them to make that decision. And then sometimes if you're DPing a project, the director may have an idea of how to block something. You may have an idea of how it may work better and be easier with the light. Sometimes it's okay to present that idea, and sometimes the director's idea is locked into stone and there's no reason to get in an argument over that. And then there's times as a filmmaker where you're working directly with a business and the business may have a particular idea or shot that they want in the spot. Sometimes it's okay to steer them away from that and explain why that doesn't work. But if they are adamant and totally sold on that idea, it's your job as a filmmaker to be an executor of their vision. And as you get more and more experience in the industry, you'll see similar problems pop up time and time again, which helps you make an educated, quick, good decision. I know for a fact that there's been times that I've been hired not necessarily because I'm the best, but because the producer, the production company, the client knows that the set will run smoothly because I'm there. Which takes me to the next point, which is client relationships and trust factor. As a filmmaker, it's important to build your client relationships on trust. And I say client, and by client I mean anybody that hires you. It could be a production company, it could be another filmmaker, it could be a business that you're working directly with. But building that foundation of trust is where everything starts. From my experience, clients value dependability and trust just as much as they value the image that's produced on set. Now, I think they're both very important, but I think that they're codependent. I don't think that one is much more valuable than the other. They're just about the same. All that being said, if you can produce a good image and have dependability and trust, clients are going to value that because clients don't want to build this relationship on and off again. They don't want one-off shooters a lot of the times. They want somebody that they can rely on and they can build a relationship with and grow with over time. Now I want to talk about something that I want to word very carefully because it's something that helped me in my career and helped me scale, but I don't think that it's necessarily the right path for everybody. But it's the fact that gear can be a source of credibility for certain clients. Gear does not make a filmmaker good, great, or bad, but there is certain scenarios where having the gear on hand can add a sense of validity and bring you into the conversation of a project. This is a very nuanced conversation, and I think it could go 1,000 different ways, and there's probably 1,000 different right answers for it. I know whenever I was early on in my career and I was shooting on the Sony a7S1, and there was times that I was in conversations, but not really in conversations because they weren't sure that I was comfortable shooting on larger cinema cameras, etc. But eventually I took the dive and I bought a cinema camera, and that opened up conversations for me to be in certain conversations, which eventually led to more jobs. And it wasn't necessarily because I had the camera, it was just because they knew that I was taking myself seriously, and so that it opened the door for me to at least be in the conversation. That being said, gear can bring validity, but it's very calculated. You have to know what conversations you are a part of or are not a part of. And you have to understand that just buying a camera definitely does not just earn you a job, but sometimes it does open the door to have conversations with certain agencies, etc. The industry is different. I think at the very, very low end, you need to have gear to execute on the vision, but then whenever you get to the really high end, you're just going to rent everything because you want the best of the best, and there's no way to own all of that equipment. And so whenever I'm on super large shoots, we're renting a bunch of stuff, and then when we're on medium-sized shoots, especially in the commercial market, we're just using the gear that I have. And so it's a constant balance of kind of figuring out your way in the industry and then how to scale and how to work your way up in the industry. Now, if you're working in the medium, small-sized commercial market, I think that there is a big benefit of having your own gear because there's times where you can rent out your gear to the production and you can make that money back. And then brands and clients value speed and efficiency on set. So if you're working off a truck that you own, having your recipes dialed in and being able to implement those recipes quickly and efficiently is a huge value add for the client. So I would say if you're planning on investing in gear and you want to work directly with brands or agencies, you obviously need to have a good camera package to start out with, but also prioritize stands and lights. Those are the things that don't tend to change as fast as some of the other things like cameras. I've been in so many different camera bodies over the course of my career. I don't necessarily want to make any recommendations, but I did want to share my experience on that because there's so many people that say don't buy gear. And I don't think that that's necessarily the right move for everybody. I think that there's times where it can be profitable. Which brings me to the next point of why some filmmakers make more, and that's understanding the business side. If you're working in the industry as a filmmaker, what we do is art, but it's also a business, and you need to look at it as such. So no matter what your role is in the industry, you're providing a solution to whatever problem is at hand. If you're a grip, you're providing a solution to the production team. Now, if you're the filmmaker working directly with the business, you're providing them with a product that helps them move more product. If you're early on in the industry, there's so much to learn, and it's like drinking from a fire hose just trying to get in the industry. But I think the big things that you need to understand is day rates, invoicing, contracts, and usage fees. And then another business skill that I think is important to have is understanding the value of the product that you're producing to the company that you're producing it for. So for example, if you're shooting something for Nike, obviously that's going to be very valuable for Nike because they're going to put a lot of ad dollars behind that and they're going to make a large return on their investment, typically from the ad that you produce. So you're going to get paid more. But if you're doing something for a mom and pop shop, a lot of the times that ROI is not going to be as high for them. So that's going to be a project that's typically valued lower. Now, that being said, if you're working directly with a brand and you can think of other ways to add value to that project, there's a lot of times where you can scale that project a little bit more and get more value out of that project. For example, creating more social pieces or more cut downs to where they can get a longer life out of the pieces or the piece of content that you're giving them. Now I want to shift focus and talk about versatility. In the industry right now, there's a lot of talk circling around the idea of niching down and specializing into a very, very specific look or becoming the car guy, for example. But in my experience, there's also value in versatility. I think there's two different trains of thought that are both valid when talking about this subject. I think there is pros that are hyper specialized and getting paid a lot more because of their specialization. But on the flip side, I think that there's professionals that are getting paid and hired more because of their versatility. For example, a DP that not only shoots the job, but could also edit and color it as well. I think in the right scenario, there's certain producers that have started to gravitate towards filmmakers like this because they're under pressure like everybody else. They have a lot of communication to do, and so being able to cut down that communication stream and being able to work with one single person that wears multiple hats across roles and delivers at a high quality is a huge value add. And then there's DPs that will AC or they'll gaff, and I think the people that work with them closely understand that they're DPs first, but being able to wear multiple hats just opens up the opportunity for them to be at the top of the call sheet and top of mind whenever that next call comes in. In this last section, I want to talk about a semi-hot topic, which is AI, but I want to talk about the filmmaker's advantage currently. From my experience, crews that can turn around edits, social cuts, and revisions quickly are commanding higher day rates, especially right now in the commercial industry. There's always new tools coming out for AI, new editing techniques, new editing softwares, image generation, but I think the eye of the filmmaker, taste, pacing, and shot choice are still the filmmaker's advantage here. All that being said, I wanted to briefly touch on it, and I think AI is here to stay, obviously, and I think that there's smart ways to implement it. And then as a last note and closing thoughts, getting paid more is not about luck, it's about positioning. You need to identify the areas that you're strongest in and then strengthen those areas and implement those into your workflow as a filmmaker. I've heard the advice to follow your passion, but I would add on to that, also identify your strengths. I think a lot of the times your strengths can be developed alongside with your passion, but it's important to objectively identify what your strengths are so that you can work those into your workflow, eventually becoming a better filmmaker, which eventually leads to higher paying jobs. My name's Keaton, I am a filmmaker. I'm sharing my journey and what I've learned along the way. If you want to continue growing together, consider subscribing. This is just the beginning of the conversation.